So the IFTJ stands for the Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice, and what it is, it's a 3-day social justice conference that takes place in Arlington, Virginia. And the first 2 days take place at a conference that is initially modeled, or basically modeled around the Ignatian solidarity networks, like pillars of solidarity and seeking justice through the Jesuit values. And so at this conference, there's a lot of conversation around how we can form or be the bridge between us as college students and like marginalized communities. So that's the first 2 days, and then the last day ends on Capitol Hill. And Capitol Hill is when the meetings with our lawmakers take place, and on this day is where we talk about our specific pieces of legislation.
So my pieces of legislation that I pushed my senators was for Senate Bill 211, the State Refugee Security Act, and Senate Bill, I believe it's 1757, which is Building America's Trust Act. So my team was the immigration team, and so I searched up a lot of immigration issues, and we looked at all of the different immigration issues that affect migrants, people who are detained at the border. So the Senate Bill 1757 specifically talks about increasing funding for detention beds and ICE, and they're already one of the largest funded government entities. And we're the only country in the world that has a quota for detention beds. We're the only country in the world that says we need to, at any given time, have a minimum amount of detention beds filled. And all of that money that comes from our taxpayers goes to private prison industry.
So the bill that I researched was Senate Bill 1588, and that's the Democracy Restoration Act, and that basically just gives voting rights back to those who were once incarcerated. And I chose this bill because I was privileged enough to attend a spring immersion in LA and meet men and women who were incarcerated. And one man in particular, his name is Castro, he told us that death isn't when you take your last breath, it's when you're forgotten. And I feel like the incarcerated in our country is one of the most forgotten populations in our country and in our society. And meeting men like Castro who want to turn their life around, I thought this bill was very important, considering the fact that it gives those who were once incarcerated a voice in our society and in our democracy.
I conducted research over House Bill 3923, Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act of 2017. What this bill would do was it would ensure the phasing out of for-profit facilities, and what I mean by this is the use of private prisons for immigration detention centers. Next, it would establish enforceable civil detention standards for DHS detention facilities, and what this means is that the facility would be held to a high standard where ultimately the goal is to decrease the use of just the maltreatment of individuals that occurs in these detention facilities. And lastly, what this bill would do, it would ensure fair, individualized custody determinations to ultimately, and what these 3 points would do, they're meant to significantly decrease the number of individuals that are being held in these immigration facilities, in these detention facilities.
It was kind of intimidating at first, especially our first meeting. So we had a total of 5 meetings that day, meeting with staffers of certain senators. As the day went on and going through our pitch several times, I got more comfortable doing it and a little less afraid of politics, so to say. They told us a lot that personal stories were really important because the government and society could be very far apart sometimes, and that kind of fueled me to continue going to the margins to hear these stories and meet the people who are affected by these policies. And it encouraged me even more to be more active in lobbying and even doing a call-in, and just how important that could be.
As always, being in DC always makes you feel like you're on the forefront. Even if even if it is just like an illusion, or maybe not so much an illusion, but I very much understand that change doesn't happen overnight. And the change that I may want to see may not be something that's attainable during this lifetime. And it's the notion of being comfortable with the fact that like you're putting in this work, and like you also understand that this will take time.